But in the wake of the September 11 attacks, a number of moral and ethical questions have been raised about the treatment by the United States of suspected terrorists.
The only CIA officer to have spoken out about rendition, detention, interrogation and torture is Glenn Carle, the author of a revealing autobiography titled The Interrogator. He's currently in Australia as part of the Sydney Writers' Festival, and he joins us now in the studio. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good morning.
Now, given how secretive an organisation the CIA is, why did you want to write this book?
Well, I didn't write it because I wanted to break secrets of the CIA, but because I am one of the only people, one of the few people with first-hand knowledge of what my agency and my country did to certain prisoners or detainees during the War on Terror. And I was so disturbed by what we actually were doing to ourselves that I felt that had I remained silent, I would have been tacitly not only covering up but sanctioning in a positive way what I found appalling.
Now, tell us your story. You were charged with the CIA of extracting information from a man suspected to have very close links at the time with Osama bin Laden.
Yes, I was an operations officer in the CIA, which meant I worked overseas to convince people to spy for the United States. I wasn't an interrogator. The CIA didn't have any interrogators. And I was approached by a senior officer who said that we had rendered, which in this instance meant kidnapped, one of the top half dozen or so members of al-Qaeda. This is in 2002. And that we believed he could lead us to bin Laden and help us destroy, probably destroy, al-Qaeda. And they wanted me involved in the interrogation. And I was told, like this: you will do whatever it takes to get this man to talk. Do you understand? And I recoiled, and I did understand. And I could not believe that an American official was referring to, if not saying directly, that we were to abuse somebody to get information.
And when you questioned that, your patriotism was called into question.
It was. As this conversation proceeded, I said, well, we don't do that. We would need at least a direct presidential order. He said, well, we have it, and so on. And I said something that CIA officers don't normally think about. Our lawyers do, but we do what the lawyers allow us to do. I said, well, what about the Geneva Convention? And the response was, well, which flag do you serve? And there's really no response to that.
Now, how did that make you feel?
Well, of course, it's just a stupid and offensive thing to say. There's no further conversation to have on that. But I became immediately aware that I might well find myself in a position where I had to say, no, I will not do this.
And there are parts of the book that have been redacted, but you've kept them blacked out. Why did you do that?
I had a long discussion about that with my publisher. I was ill at ease leaving them in. I thought the readers would be disoriented. And my publisher said, no, you don't understand. This is a big part of the story. And I believe that he's right. 40% of my initial manuscript was censored by the CIA to protect sources and methods, ostensibly. But in fact, to stop me from publishing the book, I quoted T.S. Eliot, and they took that out. I quoted Rudyard Kipling, and they took that out. And I said, well, you can't do that. You can't be a literary critic. You can stop secrets, but not destroy my book. But that's what...
You're surprised how petty it got, this whole redacting process?
There was the thing about stones. You
yes,
include the word stones.
At one point I said, well, it was endless harassment to stop me from publishing, frankly. And at one point I said, I found myself surrounded by football-sized stones. And they took that sentence out. And I said, you can't do that. I mean, the whole world is made out of rocks. And they said, well, no, that could indicate where geographical location.
Ah, right, those dreaded Afghanistan rocks, right, they're a dead giveaway. Now, as you know, there's been a bit of a new sensation in the States in the last month. Jose Rodriguez, the former head of clandestine services in the CIA, has written a very punchy book defending the so-called enhanced interrogation techniques, making the claim that they indeed led to the capture and killing of Osama bin Laden. Do you see this as some form of a pushback from the neocons and those who championed torture in the first place?
I don't see it as such. I know it as such. The book was ghostwritten by two people, a fellow named Bill Harlow and another man named Mark Thiessen. Bill Harlow was the public affairs spokesman during the Bush years for the CIA public affairs spokesman. And Thiessen was a speechwriter for Dick Cheney. So the book is clearly an apologia for the neocons who don't want to go to jail and be tarred forever, as they should be, with having forced torture upon the American government and public.
Where does American public opinion stand? You also recount quite movingly when you got back to the States, going to a dinner with former college classmates, and almost to a man and woman, they were all agreeing that you guys should do everything possible, even if it involved torture, to get the bad guys.
Or it involved a nuclear weapon blowing up 5 million people to catch one.
Is that indicative of where a lot of Americans are, in your heart of hearts?
The fear polarizes attitudes. So it's true that this is what happened to the American public for two reasons. One, because 9/11 was a terrible event, and then our leaders said we were under existential threat and there's a terrorist behind every bush, which was not true at all. There are terrorists who are dangerous, whom the CIA should go after, but not to the point where the entire nation was in danger. But an average citizen has to rely on his leaders to say, here are the dangers and here's how I will protect you. And the average person was told, we are a terrible threat. And so the response was visceral and polarizing.
And what do you make of the CIA documents that were released on the first anniversary of Osama bin Laden's death? There was
well, that's, you know, the identifying where he was and then killing him was one of the triumphs of the intelligence community. I won't claim it only for the CIA, and I had retired a couple of years before, but that's the job that we're supposed to do, is take minuscule bits of disparate, incomprehensible information and create a meaningful mosaic which can then be used by policymakers. And that was a success, so I think one should be proud of that operation.
Glenn Carle, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.